A police
Let's
officer
see that
grabs a
watch.
black man's
Take
wrist
it off,
on a
it's
sunny
fake.
Charleston sidewalk, certain the watch he's wearing has to be stolen. Because a man dressed like that couldn't possibly own something like that. He's wrong. He's more than wrong. Within the hour, a radio call will strip his badge off his chest in front of the very crowd he tried to perform for, and reveal that the suspect he humiliated spent 30 years defending the country that officer swore an oath to. By the end of this story, one man will lose everything he built his identity around, not because someone came looking for revenge, but because the truth doesn't need help finding its way out. Before we get into it, drop a comment below, and let me know where you're watching from today. And if stories like this hit you the way they hit me, hit subscribe, because I've got 2 more lined up after this one that you are not going to want to miss. Now Charleston, South Carolina. Saturday morning, King Street. The kind of morning this city sells on postcards. Wrought iron balconies dripping with ferns. Horse hooves clopping against cobblestone as a carriage tour rolls past a line of tourists waiting their turn. The farmer's market has taken over 3 blocks. Striped awnings casting shade over crates of peaches and boiled peanuts. A fiddler working a case full of dollar bills near the fountain. The smell of she-crab soup drifts out from a corner restaurant that's been open since 1962, according to the brass plaque by the door. Marcus Whitfield moves through the crowd the way a man moves when he's got nowhere he needs to be. He's 52. Silver at the temples, clothes cropped. Flannel jacket over a plain gray t-shirt, dark jeans, boots that have seen more miles than most people's cars. He looks like exactly what he's dressed to look like, a man running Saturday errands. Nothing about him asks to be noticed. He picks up a peach from a wooden crate, turns it over once in his palm, sets it back down. The vendor, an older woman with a sun hat and a name tag that says Dottie, laughs. "Not ripe enough for you, honey?" "Not yet," Marcus says. His voice is low, unhurried. "Give it another day. You know your peaches. I know patience." A small, private smile. Same thing, mostly. He came back to Charleston 8 days ago. His wife is buried 20 minutes from here, in a cemetery shaded by live oaks. And there's a headstone he visits every morning before the city wakes up all the way. His mother's house needs to be emptied out room by room, and he's been doing it slow, a drawer at a time, because some of those drawers hold things he isn't ready to touch yet. This morning, he told himself he'd just walk, get coffee, let the city be a city around him instead of a place full of errands. On his left wrist, under the cuff of his flannel, sits a watch. It doesn't look like much at a glance. Steel case, black leather band, worn soft at the edges from years against his skin. But if you looked closer, if you turned it over, you'd find an engraving on the caseback. A name, a date, a signature that belongs to the President of the United States, pressed into steel after a ceremony most of the country will never hear about. For work most of the country will never know Marcus did. He doesn't check it for the time. He checks it out of habit, the way some men touch a wedding ring. 30 feet away, parked half on the curb near the fountain, Officer Dale Pruitt watches him do it. Pruitt is 34, 6 years on the Charleston PD, built like he still thinks about his high school weight room more than he should. He's got his sunglasses pushed up on his head and his thumbs hooked into his duty belt, rocking back on his heels the way men do when they want you to notice they're the one in charge here. Beside him, his partner, Officer Renee Castillo, 27, for months out of the academy, is finishing a note on her patrol log and hasn't looked up yet. "You seeing this?" Pruitt says. Castillo glances up. "Seeing what?" "Guy by the peaches. Black t-shirt, flannel." Pruitt tips his chin. "Look at his wrist." Castillo follows his eyes. She sees a middle-aged man in worn boots picking through fruit. That's all she sees. Okay. That's not okay. That's a 5-figure watch on a guy dressed like he does yard work for a living. Maybe he does yard work and likes watches. Pruitt snorts, already moving. Yeah. Or maybe somebody's missing it. Castillo doesn't follow right away. Something in her sits wrong about the way he said it, the certainty of it, arriving before any actual reason. But 6 years to her 4 months, and she's still finding the shape of her own voice on this job. So she falls in a step behind him instead of in front. Marcus doesn't notice the 2 officers crossing the street toward him. He's paying Dottie for the peach he decided, after all, might be ready by tomorrow, bought anyway, Because you don't leave a woman stand without buying something when she's been kind to you. Excuse me, sir. Marcus turns. Pruitt is already close, closer than a stranger needs to be, chest angled forward in a way that isn't quite blocking Marcus's path, but wants to feel like it could. Morning, Marcus says. Even. Unbothered. The same voice he'd use on anyone. That's a nice watch, Pruitt says. It doesn't sound like a compliment. It sounds like the opening line of something. Marcus glances down at his own wrist, like he's confirming which watch the officer means, though there's only the one. Thank you. Mind telling me where you got it? There's a pause. Not fear. Marcus doesn't do fear, hasn't in a long time, but the particular stillness of a man deciding whether a question deserves the truth or just deserves an answer. It was a gift, he says. From who? Someone I used to work for. Pruitt's mouth curls, like that's exactly the kind of answer he was hoping for. Vague. Unverifiable. The kind of thing a man says when he doesn't actually have an answer. See, here's my problem, Pruitt says, loud enough now that a few heads at the nearby stalls start to turn. Dottie's hands go still over her crate of peaches. That's a real nice piece of jewelry for a guy standing here in work boots at a farmer's market. And somebody gave it to me. I hear that line a lot, usually right before I find out it walked off somebody else's wrist. Marcus doesn't raise his voice, doesn't so much as shift his stance. I understand you have questions, he says. Ask them. I'm not going anywhere. Oh, I know you're not, Pruitt says, and there's something almost pleased in it, like Marcus just handed him exactly the sentence he wanted. Take the watch off. Let's have a look. Behind him, Castillo has finally caught up, and for the first time since they crossed the street, she's not looking at Marcus at all. She's looking at Pruitt, and the look on her face is the first crack in the morning. The crowd around the farmer's market doesn't disperse when trouble starts. It thickens. That's the thing about a Saturday morning in a place like this. Everyone's already got a phone in their hand for the peaches and the biscuits and the fiddler by the fountain. And it takes nothing at all to turn that same phone sideways and start recording something else. Marcus is aware of this. He doesn't look for the phones, doesn't perform for them. But 30 years of rooms where every word could end up in a briefing somewhere has taught him that whatever he says next, he should be willing to say twice. Take the watch off, Pruitt says again, slower this time, like Marcus might not have understood the first time. We can do this the easy way. I heard you, Marcus says. I'm asking what the actual issue is before I do anything with my property. The issue, Pruitt says, is that I've got a reasonable suspicion that watch isn't yours. Based on what? It's not a challenge. It's a question. Asked the way Marcus has asked thousands of questions in windowless rooms. Flat, patient, built to make the other person listen to their own answer. Pruitt doesn't like it. You can see him not like it, see the muscle work in his jaw. Based on 12 years of doing this job, he says, which is a lie. He's had the job 6. And based on you standing here telling me a guy I used to work for gave you a watch that cost more than my truck. A woman near the peach stand has her phone up now, filming low, against her hip, like she doesn't want to be seen doing it. Dottie hasn't moved from behind her crates, peach still in her hand, watching with the stiff attentiveness of someone deciding whether she's about to need to remember this clearly. Sir, I'm not going to ask a third time, Pruitt says. Take it off, or I take it off you. Marcus holds his gaze for a second longer than is comfortable. Then, without hurry, he unfastens the leather band and holds the watch out, not toward Pruitt's outstretched hand, but flat on his own open palm, so that taking it requires Pruitt to actually reach for it. A small thing, a choice about who does the reaching. Pruitt snatches it up and turns it over, scanning the case like he expects a pawn shop sticker. There isn't one, just brushed steel, and on the back, small enough that Pruitt doesn't catch it in his first glance, an engraving. Where's the box? The papers. At my mother's house, Marcus says. I'm not in the habit of carrying documentation on a walk to buy peaches. A ripple of quiet laughter moves through a couple of the onlookers. Not mockery, something closer to recognition. The kind of laugh that happens when someone says a true thing out loud in a tense room. Pruitt hears it, and his neck goes red. You think this is funny? No, Marcus says. I don't think any of this is funny. Castillo shifts her weight. Dale, she says low just for him. Maybe we just look at it and hand it back. We don't have anything on I've got it, Pruitt cuts her off. not even looking at her. He turns the watch over again, and this time his thumb catches the engraving. He squints at it, reads it once. His face does something complicated for a half second, not quite recognition. More like his brain flags something as too specific to be a fake and immediately looks for a reason to dismiss the thought. This some kind of novelty thing, he says, holding it up like evidence. Custom engraving shops do this. You can get anything put on the back of a watch for $40 at a mall kiosk. You could, Marcus agrees. So that's not proof of anything. I didn't say it was. Pruitt's frustration is visible now, a flush climbing from his collar. He wanted a clean answer, a serial number filed off, a story that fell apart under pressure, something he could point to. Instead, he's got a man standing perfectly still, agreeing with him about the limits of the evidence, offering nothing to push against. Turn around, Pruitt says. Marcus's expression doesn't change, but something in his stillness sharpens. Am I being detained? You're being cooperative, Pruitt says, or you're being difficult. Your choice which one this turns into. I've answered every question you've asked me, Marcus says. I've handed over my property without resisting. I'd like to know what crime you believe I've committed before this goes any further. Grand theft, if this watch is what I think it is. And what do you think it is? Pruitt doesn't answer that. Because the honest answer, I think it's too expensive for a man who looks like you, isn't one he can say out loud. Not with 3 phones up now, and Dottie's stand gone dead silent, and his own partner watching him with an expression he doesn't want to examine too closely. Turn around, he says instead. Hands behind your back. We're going to sort this out properly at the station, where I've got access to a database instead of a guy's word. Marcus looks past Pruitt briefly to Castillo. Not pleading, just checking. The way you'd glance at the second in command in any room to see if they're going to hold the line or break from it. Castillo doesn't meet his eyes. She's staring at the watch still in Pruitt's fist, at the small engraved letters she can't quite read from here, and something about the shape of them is starting to bother her more than she can explain yet. Okay, Marcus says quietly. He turns around. He puts his hands behind his back. He does not resist. He does not raise his voice. He stands in the middle of a Saturday morning crowd on King Street, in handcuffs, watching over his own shoulder as Officer Dale Pruitt pockets a watch signed by the President of the United States like it's a piece of costume jewelry. And somewhere in the gathering silence, a phone battery counter ticks past 4 minutes of footage that is never, ever going away. The cuffs click shut, and something in the crowd shifts with them. A low murmur rolling outward from the peach stand like a stone dropped in water. Why is he in cuffs? He didn't do nothing. I got the whole thing on video. Watch, look. That's not right. That man was standing right there being polite as anything. Pruitt turns toward the noise, one hand still gripping Marcus's forearm, and raises his voice to the crowd the way a man does when he's trying to sound like he's in control of a situation that is very quickly slipping out of his hands. Everybody back up. This is a police matter. Back up, please. Nobody backs up. If anything, more phones come out. Castillo steps closer, keeping her voice down, meant only for Pruitt. This doesn't feel right, Dale. He handed it over. He hasn't given us one reason to. He hasn't given us a reason to trust him. Pruitt snaps back, just as quiet, just as sharp. That's different. You'll learn the difference. It's the kind of line that's meant to end a conversation by pulling rank on experience. And for a second it works. Castillo's mouth closes, and she looks away, toward the crowd instead of her partner, because she doesn't yet have the 6 years of "I told you," so that Pruitt is leaning on, and doubting him out loud in public on her 4th month doesn't feel like something she's earned the right to do. Not yet. She hates that thought the second she has it. Marcus stands still through all of it. His shoulders are pulled back slightly by the cuffs, an uncomfortable posture. But his face gives away nothing beyond the flat patience of a man waiting out weather. He's been in rooms far worse than this. He knows the value of not handing anyone a reaction to work with. "Sir," Castillo says to him, quieter than Pruitt's voice, almost apologetic in its register even though the words are procedural. "Do you have ID on you?" "Back left pocket," Marcus says. "You're welcome to it." She reaches carefully, retrieves a slim wallet, and flips it open. A South Carolina driver's license. Marcus A. Whitfield, Charleston address, though the birth date puts his age at 52. and something about the photo, steady eyes, same unreadable calm, makes her look up at him and then back down at the card, like she's checking they're the same person out of habit rather than doubt. Behind the license, tucked in the card slot, is a laminated ID she doesn't recognize. Federal blue, a seal she's seen before but can't immediately place, and a line of text that says clearance level, and then a string of characters that mean nothing to her, but clearly mean something. Dale, she says. Different tone now. You should look at this. In a minute. Pruitt's still got the watch turned over in his other hand, working his thumb along the engraving like he's trying to scratch it off and prove it fake by attrition. Get on the radio. Tell dispatch we need a wagon. I want this done at the station, not out here with half the city watching. Dale. Asterisk in a minute asterisk, Castillo. She looks down at the ID again. Looks at Marcus. He hasn't asked her to hurry. Hasn't asked her to intervene. Hasn't done a single thing to save himself from what's clearly about to happen. He's just standing there, cuffed, watching the crowd the way a man might watch weather rolling in, aware of it, unafraid of it, waiting to see exactly how bad it gets before deciding whether it's worth mentioning that he brought an umbrella. Sir, she says low just for him. Is there someone I should call? A lawyer family. Not yet, Marcus says. Then, almost gently, like he can see the conflict working in her. You're doing your job. Do it well. That's all I'd ask of anyone. It lands harder than he probably means it to. Castillo swallows and steps back. A man near the front of the crowd, early 30s, Charleston college sweatshirt. Phone held rock steady in both hands. Calls out, "You got a badge number, officer?" For the record. Sir, step back or you'll be next. Pruitt fires back, and the crowd's temperature rises another degree. Phone's angling to catch his face, his name tag, the words as they leave his mouth. Dottie, from behind her peach crates, hasn't said a word this whole time, but she's got her own phone out now too, filming with the flat, grim expression of a woman who has seen enough of this in her life to know exactly what it usually looks like, and exactly how rarely anyone gets held to account for it. Pruitt keys his shoulder radio. Dispatch, show us code 6 at King and Market, requesting a transport unit. Asterisk copy, King and Market. Reason for transport. Asterisk, possible stolen property. Subject, uncooperative with. I haven't been uncooperative with anything, Marcus says. Not loud, not raised. Just clear enough to carry over the radio's open mic, clear enough that the dispatcher on the other end, and everyone with a phone up, hears it too. Pruitt's jaw tightens. He releases the key without responding to the correction. Asterisk copy that. Transport en route. ETA 6 minutes. Asterisk. 6 minutes. Pruitt looks almost satisfied with that number, like it buys him time to be right before anyone can prove him wrong. He turns back to Marcus, and for the first time, there's something almost performative in his posture. Chest out, chin up, playing not to Marcus anymore, but to the ring of phones around them. See, this is the thing people don't understand, he says, loud enough to carry. I don't care how calm you are. Calm doesn't mean innocent. I've had plenty of guys stand their cool as you like right up until the computer comes back and tells a real story. Then let's find out what the computer says, Marcus says. Oh, we will. Pruitt holds the watch up again, turning it so the light catches the engraving without him actually reading it closely. Trust me, we will. Castillo, still holding the federal ID in her hand, glances down at it one more time, at the seal, at the clearance string, at the small printed line beneath it she's only now fully reading, and feels something cold settle low in her stomach that has nothing to do with the Charleston humidity. She doesn't say anything yet, but she doesn't put the ID away either. She holds onto it, like evidence she isn't ready to hand back. The transport unit is 4 minutes out when Pruitt decides he wants to be the one who cracks it. He's still holding the watch, and something about the engraving keeps pulling his eyes back to it. A name he half recognizes, a signature he can't place, a date stamped into steel that doesn't look like it came from any mall kiosk, no matter how badly he wants it to. He flips it over one more time, finds a small serial number etched along the inner rim of the caseback, barely visible unless you're looking for it. Dispatch, he says into his radio, and there's an edge of performance in it now, a man building toward a moment he thinks is going to prove him right in front of everyone. Run a serial number for me. Possible stolen luxury item. Asterisk, go ahead with the number. Asterisk. Pruitt reads it off, letter by letter, digit by digit, careful and slow, savoring it. Castillo watches him do it with the federal ID still in her hand, unspoken, and Marcus stands with his hands cuffed behind his back, watching the crowd instead of the officer, patient as a man watching a pot he already knows is about to boil. Asterisk copy, running now. Stand by. Asterisk. The wait stretches. 10 seconds. 20. Pruitt shifts his weight, glances at the crowd like he's inviting them to appreciate the professionalism of it all. See, this is how you do it right. This is due process. And Castillo notices that Marcus hasn't so much as flinched at the mention of a database search. If anything, his shoulders have relaxed a fraction, the particular ease of a man who knows exactly what's coming. Asterisk, unit requesting the serial. Be advised that number's returning a flag on our end. Registered item, Protective Services Database. Stand by for a callback. This one's routing through a liaison line. Asterisk. Pruitt frowns. What line? Asterisk, liaison. Just hold your position. We're patching you through. Asterisk. The radio goes quiet except for a faint electronic hiss. Pruitt looks at the watch in his hand like it's grown warmer. Castillo has gone very still. Then the radio crackles back to life, but the voice on it isn't the familiar cadence of Charleston County Dispatch. It's crisper, careful in the way that trained voices are careful. Asterisk, this is Special Agent Kowalski, U.S. Secret Service, Protective Intelligence. I'm showing an inquiry on a registered item associated with a former protective detail file. Can I get the name and badge number of the requesting officer? Asterisk. The crowd, which had been a low murmur of phones and whispered commentary, goes almost silent. Even Dottie's hands still over her crates. Pruitt swallows. Officer Dale Pruitt, Charleston PD, badge 4411. Asterisk copy. Officer Pruitt. That item is registered to a Marcus A. Whitfield, associated with the Department of Defense Advisory designation, formerly General Officer rank, U.S. Army. The item in question was a personal presentation gift, documented and flagged for security tracking purposes. Can you confirm whether Mr. Whitfield is currently in your custody? Asterisk. For a moment, nobody on that sidewalk moves. Marcus doesn't smile, doesn't straighten up in some triumphant way. If anything, his expression is almost tired, the look of a man who has watched this exact kind of silence fall before in different rooms for different reasons, and has stopped being surprised by how heavy it lands. Pruitt's mouth opens, closes. The radio waits. Yes, Pruitt manages. He's detained. There was a report of, he stops. There was no report. There was never a report. There was only a watch on a stranger's wrist, and an assumption Pruitt had made before he'd asked a single real question. And now that assumption is sitting in the open air in front of 40 phones and a federal agent on an open channel. Asterisk understood. I need you to remove any restraints from Mr. Whitfield immediately and treat him with the courtesy his designation requires. This call is being logged. Is your supervising officer on scene? Asterisk. No, Pruitt says, and his voice has lost every ounce of the swagger it carried 4 minutes ago. No, ma'am. Sir. No, they're not. Asterisk. Then I'd recommend you request one. Asterisk. Castillo is already moving before Pruitt finishes processing the sentence. She steps behind Marcus, keys turning in the cuffs, and the metal falls away from his wrists with a small, final click that seems to echo louder than it should. I'm sorry, she says, quiet, just to him, and means it in a way that goes beyond procedure. I should have said something sooner. Marcus rubs his wrists once, unhurried, and looks at her. Not with anger, not even really with judgment. You said something, he says. That counts for more than you think. Someone in the crowd, the young man in the Charleston College sweatshirt, says it out loud for everyone still catching up. Wait, General, he's a general? The word moves through the crowd like current through water. Phones that had been filming discreetly are now filming openly, aimed at Pruitt's face, at the watch still sitting in his open palm like it's suddenly become too hot to hold. Pruitt looks down at it, reads the engraving properly for the first time. Really reads it, the name, the date, the signature that belongs to the President of the United States, and something in his face collapses inward, the particular expression of a man watching the version of the morning he'd built for himself dissolve in real time. I didn't know, he says, to no one in particular, to Marcus, to the radio, to the crowd. I didn't. How was I supposed to know that? Marcus takes the watch back from Pruitt's slackened hand. Gently, the way you take something fragile from a child who's already dropped one. You weren't supposed to know, Marcus says. You were supposed to ask. He fastens the band back around his wrist, unhurried, and the crowd around them has gone quiet in a different way now, not tense, but watching. The way people watch something that's about to matter. In the distance, sirens are approaching. Not the transport wagon Pruitt requested. Captain Louise Harmon's cruiser. Captain Louise Harmon doesn't like surprises, and she likes them even less when they arrive as a live radio call from a United States Secret Service, patched through her own dispatch on an open channel, in front of what her scanner traffic is already calling a large crowd, multiple recording devices. She's out of her cruiser before it's fully stopped, 49 years old and built like a woman who spent 3 decades not asking twice for anything. She crosses the cordon of gawking tourists with the flat, fast stride of someone who already knows, in broad strokes, exactly how bad this is going to be, and is only here to find out the specifics. Pruitt, she says. No greeting. Report. Pruitt straightens like the word yanked a string in his spine. Captain, we had to stop. Subject had a high-value item. I ran the serial to verify ownership, and it came back flagged through a federal. I heard the radio traffic. Harmon cuts in. I heard all of it, Pruitt, on my drive over, because apparently half the department heard it too. What I want to know is what you had before you put a man in handcuffs on King Street on a Saturday morning. Silence. Officer Pruitt. What did you have? He was wearing an expensive watch, Pruitt says. And even as it leaves his mouth, he seems to hear how it sounds, said flatly like that, without anything else attached to it. Dressed casual. Said a guy he used to work for gave it to him. That fell off to me. It fell off to you. Harmon's voice doesn't rise. It doesn't need to. Based on what article of law? Was there a theft report? A description matching him? Anything on the board this morning? No, ma'am. So what you had, Harmon says, was a black man in a flannel jacket wearing a nice watch, and a feeling. Pruitt doesn't answer that. There isn't an answer that survives being said out loud. Harmon turns from him before he can try to build one anyway, and walks the few steps to where Marcus is standing, near the peach stand, rubbing absently at one wrist where the cuff sat. Up close, she takes him in properly for the first time. The stillness of him, the way he holds himself, the specific quality of calm that Harmon, 26 years on this job, recognizes as something earned rather than performed. Mr. Whitfield. She extends a hand. Captain Louise Harmon, Watch Commander. I want to apologize to you directly, on behalf of this department, for what just happened to you. Not the officer. Me. My name attached to it. Marcus shakes her hand. His grip is steady, unhurried. Same as everything else about him. Appreciated, Captain. I understand you were treated as a suspect based on nothing more than your appearance, and a watch you were fully cooperative about. That's correct. And that you were placed in restraints without cause in a public setting, while cooperating. Also correct. Harmon nods slowly, jaw tight, the muscles in her neck working like she's holding several sentences behind her teeth that aren't fit for a public sidewalk. I'd like your name and a number where I can reach you. Not for anything today. Today, I already know what happened. I've got 40 witnesses and their phones to prove it. I mean, for the record. For what happens to Officer Pruitt next. You'll have it, Marcus says. Harmon turns back toward Pruitt, and Castillo, still standing a few feet off, the federal ID card now handed back into Marcus's wallet, her own hands empty and folded tightly in front of her, like she doesn't quite know what to do with them. Castillo, walk with me. Harmon's voice softens marginally for her partner's rookie. Give me your account. Everything. What you saw, what you said, when you said it. Castillo swallows. She glances once at Pruitt, who's staring at the ground now, at nothing, at the collapse of a version of himself he'd been building for 6 years, and then back at her captain. I told him it didn't feel right, Castillo says. Before the cuffs went on. I told him the ID looked federal and he should look at it. He told me I'd learn the difference. between not trusting someone and not having a reason to trust them. Her voice catches slightly, then steadies. I didn't push harder. I should have pushed harder. Harmon studies her for a moment, not with anger, but with something more clinical. The assessment of a commander deciding what kind of officer is standing in front of her and what she's worth investing in. You said something, Harmon says finally. Most rookies with 4 months on don't say anything at all, especially not to a training officer who outranks their nerve. That's not nothing, Castillo. But you're right that it should have been more. Learn that lesson now, while it costs you an uncomfortable conversation instead of a career. Yes, ma'am. Harmon turns her attention fully back to Pruitt, who's watching her approach the way a man watches a verdict walk toward him. Dale Pruitt, she says, I'm relieving you of duty, effective right now, pending an internal affairs investigation into this stop. Hand me your weapon and your badge. Captain. This isn't a discussion. Her voice, for the first time, does rise, not loud, but hard, cutting clean through whatever Pruitt was about to say. You put a general officer of the United States Army in handcuffs on a public sidewalk because you didn't like his sleeves. You did it in front of 40 cameras on an open radio channel, with a rookie partner watching you learn absolutely nothing from her discomfort. Badge and weapon. Now, Pruitt's hands are shaking slightly as he unclips his sidearm, sets it in Harmon's outstretched palm. He unpins his badge next, the small piece of metal that has meant, for 6 years, everything he thought he was. He hands it over like it weighs more than it should. Am I fired? His voice has gone small. That's not my call to make alone, Harmon says. But I'll tell you what I'll be recommending, and I'll tell you why in the report I write tonight. She pauses, looks past him at the crowd still filming, at the peach stand, at Marcus Whitfield standing quiet and composed in the middle of a morning that has just ended his career without Marcus raising his voice once. Because a badge is supposed to mean you protect people you don't understand until you understand them. Not that you get to decide who deserves your suspicion before you've asked them a single honest question. She turns to Marcus one final time. Mr. Whitfield, I'll be in touch. I am deeply sorry this happened to you in my city. Marcus nods once unhurried and glances down at his wrist, at the watch, back where it belongs, catching the Charleston sun. Your officer asked the wrong question, he says quietly. The right one was never that hard to ask. The footage is online before Marcus even makes it back to his mother's house. By Sunday morning, the clip, 41 seconds of Officer Dale Pruitt snapping cuffs onto a calm, cooperating man over a watch, followed by 26 seconds of a Secret Service agent's voice crackling out of a patrol radio, has been watched 2 million times. By Monday, it's on the local news. By Tuesday, it's on the national news, with Marcus's name blurred out of respect for a request he made through the department, though it doesn't stay blurred for long once a local news anchor recognizes the engraving mentioned in Harmon's official statement and does the arithmetic herself. Internal affairs moves fast, faster than these things usually move, because there is no ambiguity left to investigate. There's a recording of everything. There's an open radio channel with a federal agent's voice on it. There's Castillo's statement, given without hedging, without protecting her training officer, laid out in careful, specific language. The subject was fully cooperative at every stage. I raised a concern prior to the use of restraints. That concern was dismissed. The Internal Affairs report runs 11 pages. The conclusion runs 1 paragraph. Asterisk Officer Dale Pruitt's decision to detain Mr. Marcus A. Whitfield lacked reasonable suspicion at every stage of the encounter. The stop was initiated based on the subject's appearance and attire, escalated without cause to physical restraint, and continued despite full cooperation and a rookie officer's documented objection. This conduct is found to be in direct violation of Department Policy 4.2, Reasonable Suspicion Standards, and Department Policy 7.1, Bias-Free Policing. Termination is recommended, asterisk. Captain Harmon reads the recommendation into the record at a closed disciplinary hearing on a gray Thursday morning, in a windowless room on the 3rd floor of Charleston PD headquarters. Pruitt sits across the table from her, in civilian clothes for the first time in 6 years during a working week, hands folded tight in front of him like he's trying to hold something together that's already come apart. Officer Pruitt, Harmon says, Do you have anything to add to the record before this recommendation is finalized? Pruitt is quiet for a long moment. When he speaks, his voice doesn't have the swagger it had on King Street. It sounds like a much younger man's voice, one that hasn't figured out yet how to talk his way out of a room. I thought I was doing my job, he says. You thought wrong, Harmon says. Not cruel, just final. Doing the job is asking questions before you decide the answer. What you did was decide the answer and go looking for a reason afterward. That's not policing. That's just prejudice with a badge attached to it. The termination is finalized within the week. The department spokesperson reads a 2-sentence statement to a bank of cameras outside headquarters. Asterisk following a full internal review. Officer Dale Pruitt has been terminated from the Charleston Police Department for cause, effective immediately. His certification has been referred to the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy for further review, asterisk. That referral matters more than the press release. Let's on. In South Carolina, a certification review by the State Academy can result in permanent decertification, meaning Pruitt wouldn't just lose this job. He'd lose the ability to hold any sworn law enforcement position anywhere in the state, ever again. The Academy's board convenes 6 weeks later, reviews the footage, the radio transcript, Castillo's statement, and Harmon's report, and votes unanimously to revoke his certification. 6 years, 4 months short of the 7-year mark that would have vested his pension. He walks away with nothing but what he put into it himself, no department contribution, no bridge to another job in the only field he's ever worked in as an adult. Marcus, for his part, doesn't attend the disciplinary hearing. He's asked, and he declines gently. Through the lawyer, he retains not to punish Pruitt further, but to make sure the process happens the way it's supposed to. The way it so rarely happens for people who don't have a president's signature on their wrist to make a department move this fast. That's the part that sits heaviest in the weeks that follow. And it's the part Marcus keeps returning to in the quiet mornings at his wife's grave. Not his own treatment. His own treatment got corrected in 6 minutes because of what he happened to be carrying that day. It's the thought of every other name attached to a similar radio call that never got made. Every other cooperative, composed, entirely innocent person who didn't have a Secret Service liaison line on file, and who walked away from a sidewalk stop with a record instead of an apology. A civil rights attorney reaches out within days, not hired by Marcus, but representing a coalition of local advocacy groups who spent years cataloging complaints against the department that never generated so much as a memo. They file a formal request with the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, citing Pruitt's stop as Exhibit A in a pattern and practice complaint that includes 14 other incidents, most involving officers who are, as of this filing, still on the street. The DOJ opens a preliminary review within a month. It isn't a lawsuit yet. It's a first step, the kind of institutional gear that turns slowly, but turns. Marcus reads about the DOJ review in the newspaper on his mother's porch, coffee going cold beside him. And for the first time since King Street, something that isn't quite a smile crosses his face. Not satisfaction, exactly. Something closer to recognition. The sense of a door that had been jammed, shut, finally beginning, just barely, to give. He folds the paper, sets it down, and picks up his phone instead, scrolling to a name he hadn't expected to save that Saturday morning, but did anyway. Officer Rene Castillo. He types a short message. Asterisk, you did the harder thing, saying something when it cost you. That matters more going forward than it did that day. If you're ever willing to talk about what comes next for you, I'd be glad to listen. Asterisk. He doesn't hear back that afternoon. He doesn't expect to. But 3 days later, his phone buzzes with a reply for words long, and something about their bluntness tells him everything he needs to know about who Rene Castillo is going to become. Asterisk, I'd like that. Thank you, asterisk. 3 months pass before Dale Pruitt works up the nerve to find Marcus Whitfield. He doesn't call. He doesn't write. He shows up on a Tuesday afternoon in late autumn, outside the modest brick building downtown, where the DOJ's preliminary review team has set up temporary offices for witness interviews. Because Marcus, despite never having wanted the spotlight this whole thing put on him, agreed to speak with investigators as part of the broader pattern and practice complaint. Pruitt knows the schedule because his own attorney, still representing him in the decertification appeal, mentioned it in passing, and something in Pruitt latched onto the information like it was the only door left open to him. He's standing across the street when Marcus comes out, dressed now in a suit rather than the flannel and jeans of that Saturday morning, looking, if anything, more like what he actually is. Pruitt almost doesn't cross. He stands there long enough that Marcus notices him first, clocks him the way you'd clock a hazard, calmly, without alarm, and simply waits to see what he intends to do with himself. Pruitt crosses. Mr. Whitfield. His voice cracks slightly on the name. General. I wasn't sure what to call you. Marcus is fine. Pruitt nods, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets, shoulders drawn in on themselves in a way that would have been unrecognizable to the man standing in the middle of King Street 3 months ago with his thumbs hooked in his belt. He's thinner. There's a rawness to his face, the look of a man who hasn't been sleeping well and has had a great deal of time, suddenly, to sit with himself. I know I don't have any right to ask you for anything, Pruitt says. I know that. I needed to say it to your face. Not to a camera, not to internal affairs. To you. Marcus doesn't fill the silence for him. He waits, the same patience he showed on the sidewalk, except now, it isn't a tactic. It's simply who he is. I'm sorry, Pruitt says, for what I did to you, for assuming what I assumed the second I saw you. I told myself for years that I was good at reading people. Instincts, you know. 6 years on the street, you start to think you've got a sense for things. He shakes his head. It wasn't instinct. It was what I already believed, dressed up as instinct. And I never had to find that out, because nobody ever pushed back hard enough to make me look at it. Until you. That's a fair thing to understand about yourself, Marcus says. Late, but fair. I lost everything, Pruitt says, and there's no self-pity in it, just plain accounting. My job, my certification, I can't work this field anywhere in the state now, not ever. My pension, 4 months short. I've got a mortgage and a kid starting kindergarten in the fall, and I don't know what I'm going to tell my wife when the savings run out. He looks up. I'm not saying that so you feel sorry for me. I'm saying it because I want you to know I understand the size of what I did. It wasn't small. It cost me everything, and it should have. His voice catches again. I guess I'm asking if there's any way back from this. Any second chance, in your eyes, if not the department's. Marcus is quiet for a long moment, considering him, not coldly, but carefully, the way he might consider a report that requires more than a yes or no answer. I appreciate you finding me to say this, he says finally. Most men in your position would have let their lawyer do all the talking and gone the rest of their life telling themselves a version of that morning that lets them sleep. You didn't do that. That counts for something. Pruitt exhales, something in his shoulders loosening slightly. But I want to be honest with you, Marcus continues, because I think you've earned honesty more than you've earned comfort. This isn't about one moment on a sidewalk. If it were one moment, I could tell you it's forgiven and mean it completely, and we'd both walk away lighter. But you told Officer Castillo, in front of me, that there's a difference between not trusting someone and not having a reason to trust them. And you'd already made up your mind about me before you ever asked me a single question. That's not a moment. That's a pattern you walked around with for 6 years. And I wasn't the first person who paid for it. I was just the first person whose watch had a name on it that made the department move. Pruitt's jaw works. He doesn't argue. There isn't room to. So I'm not going to tell you I forgive you, Marcus says. And I'm not going to tell you I don't. What I'll tell you is this. I understand what today cost you to say. I believe you mean it. And what happens next isn't something I decide for you. It's something you build slowly by becoming a different kind of man than the one who put those cuffs on me. Not for my sake. For the next person who doesn't have a federal liaison line to save them. I don't know how to do that, Pruitt admits. Start over as someone different. Nobody does at the beginning, Marcus says. You start anyway. He extends his hand, not the wide, easy shake he gave Captain Harmon, but something smaller, more careful, an acknowledgement rather than an absolution. Pruitt takes it like it's more than he expected to be offered. Thank you, Pruitt says, for saying any of that to me at all. Marcus nods once, turns and walks back toward the building, leaving Pruitt standing alone on the sidewalk in the thin autumn light, Not forgiven, not condemned, just told the truth plainly, by a man who has never once needed to raise his voice to be heard. Winter comes to Charleston the way it always does, briefly, almost apologetically. A handful of cold mornings before the city remembers itself as a southern town and warms back up. Marcus spends most of it finishing the work on his mother's house, box by box, room by room, the way he told himself he would from the start. But somewhere in the slow work of sorting through someone else's life, he starts a different kind of project, one that isn't about drawers or photo albums at all. It begins with a phone call from the mayor's office. Charleston's mayor, a soft-spoken man named Harold Whitaker, who has spent the last several months watching his police department become a national headline for exactly the wrong reasons, reaches out to Marcus directly. Not through a press liaison, not through an aide reading from script. Whitaker calls himself on a Sunday evening and asks Marcus if he'd be willing to sit down and talk about what comes next for a department that everyone now agrees needs to change, but nobody seems to agree on how. Marcus almost says no. He spent 30 years fixing systems bigger than himself, and he came to Charleston to bury his wife and empty his mother's house, not to take on the reform of a city police department that isn't his to fix. But something about the way Whitaker frames the ask stays with him. Not can you help us look better, but can you help us actually be better? Because I don't know how. And I'd rather ask the man we failed than pretend I already have the answer. Marcus agrees to one meeting. One meeting becomes 6. He doesn't come to it as a general. And he's careful in every room to make sure nobody in the building starts treating him like one. He comes to it as a taxpayer, a citizen, a man who is handcuffed on a public sidewalk over nothing, sitting at a table with police leadership, city council members, and a coalition of community advocates who have been asking for exactly this kind of seat at exactly this kind of table for years, and, until now, never gotten it. The work is unglamorous. It's committee meetings that run long. It's budget lines and staffing models and arguments over what reasonable suspicion should mean in writing, not just in theory. It's Captain Harmon, promoted now to deputy chief, sitting across from advocates who don't trust her department and have every reason not to, absorbing their frustration without flinching. Because she's the one who has to answer for 6 years of complaints that never generated more than a shrug. Out of those 6 months of unglamorous work comes something concrete. The Charleston Civilian Oversight and Accountability Board, an independent body not appointed by the police chief, not staffed by former officers with something to protect, but seated by a mix of community members, a retired judge, a civil rights attorney, and one seat reserved permanently for someone with direct experience being on the wrong end of a stop like the one Marcus endured. The board has real power. Subpoena authority for incident reports, a public dashboard tracking stop and search data by neighborhood and by officer, and the ability to refer cases directly to the state certification board without needing the department's blessing first. Alongside it comes a revised stop protocol, quietly nicknamed the Ask First policy inside the department, though nobody puts that name on the official paperwork. It requires, in plain and specific language, that any stop escalating to physical restraint be preceded by an articulable, documented reason beyond appearance, attire, or instinct. It requires a second officer's concurrence before restraints are applied in a nonviolent encounter. It requires body cameras to be active and unmuted for the entirety of any stop, no exceptions, with automatic review of any stop lasting longer than 5 minutes. None of it is Marcus's alone. He says that, pointedly, every time someone tries to credit him with the whole thing. In city council meetings, in the one interview he agrees to give to a local paper, in the quiet conversations with advocates who'd been pushing for these exact changes long before his name ever became attached to any of it. I didn't build this, he tells the reporter, when she asks him to describe his role. I got a seat at a table that should have already existed. What matters is that it exists now, and that it doesn't disappear the moment my name stops being useful to anyone. Renee Castillo is at nearly every meeting too, though her seat is a different one. She'd reached out to Marcus again in the weeks after their first exchange, tentative at first, and their conversations had turned gradually into something like mentorship, not Marcus telling her what to do, but asking her the kinds of questions that made her figure it out herself. What kind of officer do you want to be 5 years from now? What would you have needed that morning to push back harder, sooner. What would make it easier for the next rookie standing where you stood? By spring, Castillo has been accepted into the department's field training program. Not as a trainee this time, but as a training officer herself, years ahead of the department's usual timeline, on the strength of a recommendation from Deputy Chief Harmon that reads, in part, Officer Castillo demonstrated the willingness to name a problem in real time, under pressure, from a subordinate position, when doing so was neither easy nor without professional cost. That is precisely the instinct this department needs more of, not less. Marcus attends her first day of training, a rookie class, not because he's invited officially, but because Castillo asks him to, quietly, the week before. He sits in the back of the room while she stands at the front, 28 years old now, steady in a way she wasn't a year ago, and watches her teach 11 new officers, something that was never on the curriculum when she went through it herself. You're going to have a feeling sometimes, she tells the class, that something's off about a person. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. The job isn't to trust that feeling blindly, and it isn't to ignore it either. The job is to ask yourself every single time, what do I actually have beyond the feeling? And if the honest answer is nothing, then you don't get to act like you have something. That's not weakness. That's the whole job. She doesn't mention Marcus by name. She doesn't need to. A few of the older instructors in the room know exactly which morning she's describing, and there's a particular quiet in the room when she finishes, not uncomfortable, just attentive, the kind of quiet that means something actually landed. Afterward, in the parking lot, Castillo finds Marcus by his car. How was it, she asks, and there's something almost nervous in the question, like she's still checking her work against a standard she respects. You didn't need me there, Marcus says. You already knew what you were teaching. I just got to watch you say it. She smiles, a small, tired, genuine thing. I don't think I would have known what I was teaching a year ago. No, Marcus agrees. A year ago, you didn't have the words for it yet. Now you do. That's the whole difference between a mistake that changes someone and a mistake that just gets buried. He gets in his car, rolls the window down before pulling out. Keep asking the harder question, Officer Castillo, even when it costs you something to ask it. Especially then. She watches him drive off, the same way she'd watched him stand cuffed and composed on King Street almost a year earlier, and thinks, not for the first time, that some people teach you more in a handful of sentences than others manage in whole careers. The one-year mark arrives quietly, the way most anniversaries of terrible mornings do, not with fanfare, but as an ordinary Saturday that happens to fall on a date someone remembers, even when the calendar doesn't announce it. Marcus doesn't plan to be on King Street that day. He stayed in Charleston longer than he originally intended. His mother's house sold in the spring, the last of the estate work finally wrapped, and yet something about the city has kept him here past a point where logistics required it. He tells himself it's his wife's grave, the 20-minute drive he still makes most mornings before the day gets away from him. That's true. But it isn't the whole truth, and he knows it. The whole truth is that he started something here he isn't ready to walk away from yet. He's at the farmer's market out of habit more than intention. Same crate of peaches, same vendor, Dottie, who recognized him the second time he came back and has saved him the best of her crop every Saturday since, whether he asks for it or not. She doesn't mention the anniversary either. She doesn't have to. There's a particular gentleness in the way she hands him his bag this morning, like she's marking the date in her own quiet way. You doing all right today? She asks. I am, Marcus says and means it. Better than I expected to. This time last year. She nods, like that's answer enough, and goes back to arranging her stand. Marcus is halfway through the market when he spots Castillo, off duty, in jeans and a Citadel sweatshirt, standing near the fountain with a coffee, watching a group of rookie officers walk their own community engagement patrol along the market's edge. It's part of the new protocol, one of the smaller pieces of the reform package that never made headlines, but has quietly reshaped how the department trains its newest officers. Every rookie spends their first month walking public spaces without a partner senior enough to talk over them, required to introduce themselves to at least 10 business owners and residents by name before their first solo patrol. Castillo sees him and lifts a hand. He crosses to her. Didn't expect to run into you here, she says. I could say the same. I like watching them, she admits, nodding toward the rookies. Half of them are terrified of getting it wrong. Good. That's the right amount of scared to be, starting out. Marcus follows her gaze. One of the young officers, a woman who can't be older than 23, is crouched down at Dottie's stand, laughing at something the older woman said, notepad in hand, actually writing down the names of vendors instead of just walking past them. It's such a small thing. It's exactly the kind of small thing that used to not happen at all. How's command treating you? Marcus asks. Good, actually. Strange to say out loud, but good. Castillo takes a sip of her coffee. I got moved up again in March. I'm running training department-wide now, not just the one class. That's fast. Harmon says it's earned, not fast. A small smile. I'm inclined to believe her most days. They stand together in comfortable quiet for a moment, watching the market move around them. Tourists with shopping bags, a fiddler at the fountain who might be the same one from a year ago. The ordinary Saturday churn of a city that has mostly moved on from what happened here, the way cities do, except for the people who were actually standing on this sidewalk when it happened. Can I tell you something? Castillo says. Something I haven't said to anyone else yet. Of course. Last month, I had a new officer, 3 weeks in, still finding his feet, come to me after a shift. Told me he'd almost stopped a kid outside a convenience store. 16, 17 maybe, hoodie up, moving fast. His gut told him something was off. She pauses. He didn't stop him. He told me afterward that he thought about what I taught in that first class. What do you actually have beyond the feeling? And he realized the honest answer was nothing. So he let it go. Turned out the kid was just late for his shift at the store 2 doors down. Nothing happened. Nobody got hurt. Nobody even knows it almost went a different way except him and me. She looks at Marcus. That's not a story anyone's going to put in a headline. There's no dramatic reveal, no viral video. It's just a 17-year-old kid who got to walk into work like it was a normal day, because one officer paused for 2 extra seconds and asked himself a question instead of acting on instinct. Her voice softens. I think about that more than I think about the big stuff. The board, the policy, all of it. That's the actual point, isn't it? Not the dramatic version. The quiet version multiplied 1,000 times that nobody ever hears about. Marcus is quiet for a moment, watching the rookies finish their loop of the market and gather near the fountain to compare notes. That's exactly the point, he says finally. The loud version is what got people's attention. The quiet version is what actually matters. Most of the work worth doing in this world doesn't come with cameras. You still think about that day? Castillo asks. It's the first time in a year she's asked him directly, rather than around the edges of it. Sometimes, Marcus admits, less than I expected to. I think about it less as something that happened to me now, and more as something that happened to start something. That's a strange kind of mercy, to be honest. Most people who go through what I went through don't get anything to point to on the other side of it. Just the humiliation, and then nothing. I got the humiliation, and then I got this. He gestures loosely at the market, the rookies, the whole ordinary, unremarkable Saturday. I don't take that for granted. I know exactly how rare it is. Because of the watch, Castillo says quietly. Because of the watch, Marcus agrees. Which is its own kind of uncomfortable thing to sit with. I got justice because of what I was wearing, not because of what happened to me. That's not lost on me. It's most of why I stayed involved in all this longer than I planned to. Because I know how easily a version of that morning happens to someone else every single week, in cities that don't have a general's watch to force the issue. Castillo doesn't have a response to that right away, and Marcus doesn't need her to. It's simply the truth sitting between them, the way it sat between them since the day she handed back a set of keys and said, I'm sorry, I should have said something sooner. You did say something, Marcus says again, now, the same words from a year ago, though they mean something different spoken today. On the other side of everything that followed. You kept saying something. That's the whole difference in the end. Across the market, one of the rookies, the young woman who'd been writing down vendor names, waves at Castillo, holding up a completed page of notes like she's proud of it. Castillo waves back, something warm crossing her face. I should go debrief them, she says. You want to come? They'd probably lose their minds meeting you. Marcus laughs, quiet and genuine. "I think I'll let this one stay yours, Officer Castillo. Some things work better without the general in the room." She smiles, understanding exactly what he means, and heads off toward the fountain, toward the next generation of officers, standing in a loose circle, notebooks out, learning slowly, unglamorously, the quiet version of the lesson that started 1 year ago today, on this exact stretch of sidewalk. Marcus watches her go, then turns back toward Dottie's stand, picks up his bag of peaches, and continues on with his morning. No cameras, no crowd, no reveal. Just an ordinary Saturday, which is, itself, the whole point of everything the last year was for. 2 years after that Saturday morning on King Street, a police department in Ohio cites Charleston's Civilian Oversight and Accountability Board by name in its own reform proposal, presented to a city council 3 states away by officials who have never met Marcus Whitfield and likely never will. A department in Nevada adopts a version of the Ask First protocol almost word for word, changing only the letterhead. A criminal justice reform nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. produces a case study, the Charleston model, that gets passed around in policy, circles the way these things do, cited in footnotes, referenced in grant applications, taught for one class period in a handful of graduate criminal justice programs. None of it happens because anyone remembers the specifics of what took place that morning. Most of the people building on it now couldn't tell you the color of Marcus's watch, or the name of the officer who put the cuffs on him, or the exact words Captain Harmon used when she took his badge. The story, in the way stories do, has worn down to its outline, a stop, a reveal, a reckoning, a rebuilding. What survives isn't the drama of it. What survives is the plumbing. The Oversight Board's charter language copied and adapted. The specific wording of the escalation protocol, borrowed nearly intact. The training curriculum Castillo built, now used, with her permission and occasional consultation, by 3 other departments in the Southeast. This is what a ripple actually looks like up close. Not a wave. Just water moving, quietly, into places that never knew where it started. Marcus learns about the Ohio proposal the way he learns about most of it now, secondhand, in a brief mention during a quarterly call with the Charleston Oversight Board, where he still holds his seat, though he's begun talking, gently, about the importance of eventually handing it to someone whose life wasn't defined by a single incident. "The board shouldn't need me forever," he tells them more than once. "If it does, we haven't built it right." He's back in Charleston that week for the call, though he splits his time now between here and Washington, where his advisory work for the Department of Defense has resumed at something closer to its old pace. He still keeps the house. He still visits the grave most mornings when he's in town, and the caretaker there has stopped needing directions to find him, because Marcus has become, in his own quiet way, part of the landscape of that cemetery, the same way he's become part of the landscape of this city. Not a legend, not exactly, but a fixture. A man people nod to. On the morning this story closes, Marcus walks the cemetery path under live oaks heavy with Spanish moss, the way he has walked it more mornings than he could count over these 2 years. The headstone is simple, the way she would have wanted it, her name, the dates, and beneath them, a single line she'd chosen herself years before she needed it. She asked good questions and waited for honest answers. Marcus has thought more than once about how much of what happened on King Street traces back to that same idea. Ask good questions. Wait for honest answers. Officer Pruitt never did either, not until it was too late for it to matter to his career, though, from what Marcus has heard through the department, filtered secondhand, Pruitt has, at least, started doing something with the wreckage. He took a job managing a warehouse outside the city, keeps his head down, and by all accounts has become, of all things, an advocate within his own small circle for de-escalation training in adjacent industries, private security, retail loss prevention, arguing, apparently with real conviction now, that the same instinct that cost him everything is quietly costing other people their dignity in 100 smaller, less visible ways every single day. It's not redemption, not exactly. Marcus doesn't think in those terms any more than he ever did. But it's something. A man doing the slow, unglamorous work of becoming different, the way Marcus told him to, in a conversation neither of them will forget. Marcus kneels at the headstone for a while, the way he does most mornings, not speaking, just present. When he stands again, he brushes the grass from his knees and looks out over the rows of stones, the moss shifting overhead in a breeze coming off the harbor. He thinks about the watch on his wrist, still there, still worn soft at the edges, still catching morning light the same way it caught it that Saturday 2 years ago. He thinks about how strange it is that a single object, a gift given for reasons that had nothing to do with any of this, ended up doing more to move a city than any speech he ever gave in 30 years of service. He thinks about how uncomfortable that fact still sits with him, and how he stopped trying to make it sit more comfortably, because some truths aren't supposed to feel good. They're just supposed to be sat with, honestly, the way you'd sit with anything else true. He thinks, mostly, about Rene Castillo standing in front of a room of rookies, teaching them to ask themselves a single honest question before they act. About a 17-year-old kid who walked into his shift on time because one young officer paused 2 extra seconds. About all the mornings in all the cities that will never make the news because nothing dramatic happened in them, because someone somewhere asked first. That's the whole of it in the end. Not the reveal, not the reckoning, just the quiet mornings after multiplying unnoticed, everywhere reform actually manages to take root. Marcus checks the time on his wrist, an old habit worn soft, meaning something different now than it used to, and heads back toward his car, toward another ordinary Saturday, in a city that started, almost by accident, to become a little more honest with itself. There's a particular kind of story that gets told about moments like the one on King Street, and it's usually the wrong kind. It's a story where the reveal is the ending, where the badge comes out, or the radio call comes through, or the crowd gasps, and the credits roll on the satisfaction of watching someone powerful finally get what they deserve. That version of the story is easy to tell and easy to watch, because it lets everyone go home believing that justice is a single dramatic moment rather than years of unglamorous, invisible work. Marcus Whitfield's story only looks like that version from a distance. Up close, the radio call and the handcuffs and Captain Harmon taking a badge off Officer Pruitt's chest. All of that took less than an hour. Everything that actually mattered happened afterward, slowly, in committee rooms and training classes and quiet phone calls between a retired general and a rookie officer who was brave enough, for months into her career, to say this doesn't feel right out loud, even when her training officer told her she'd learn the difference. That's the part worth sitting with. Not the watch. Not the reveal. The fact that Rene Castillo's discomfort, small, quiet, easy to dismiss, turned out to be the actual hinge the whole story swung on. She wasn't a general. She didn't have a federal liaison line. She had a bad feeling about what she was watching, and the willingness, eventually, to act on it, and to keep acting on it for 2 years afterward until it became a career built around asking the right question at the right moment. The uncomfortable truth Marcus never stopped naming, in every interview he agreed to, and every quiet conversation with Pruitt or Castillo or Captain Harmon, is that most people who go through what he went through don't get a Secret Service call back to save them. They get a record instead of an apology, a bruise instead of a hearing, silence instead of a headline. What made his morning different wasn't that the injustice was worse than what happens to other people on other sidewalks in other cities every single day. It's that his injustice happened to come with proof attached, undeniable and immediate, in a way that most injustice never does. That's not a flaw in this story. It's the whole reason the story matters. Marcus never let the department or the cameras or the public treat his case as an isolated failure by one bad officer. He kept insisting, patiently, the way he insisted on everything, that the real work wasn't punishing Dale Pruitt. That part was almost easy once the truth was undeniable. The real work was building something that didn't require an undeniable watch to produce an undeniable outcome. A board with subpoena power. A protocol that asks officers to document their reasoning instead of trusting their gut. A training program that teaches new officers, explicitly out loud in a classroom, the exact question that might have stopped that Saturday morning before it started. What do you actually have, beyond the feeling? None of that erases what happened to him. He said so himself more than once, to Pruitt's face and to reporters, and to his own reflection on quiet mornings at his wife's grave. But it gives the humiliation somewhere to go besides nowhere. It turns one bad morning into a hinge instead of just a wound. That's the moral this story keeps circling back to in every section, in every quiet exchange between Marcus and the people whose lives brushed against his that day. Dignity shouldn't require proof. Respect shouldn't be conditional on rank or wealth or the right engraving on the back of a watch. The measure of a just system isn't how it treats the people who can prove, beyond any doubt, that they deserve better. It's how it treats everyone else. The people with no watch, no title, no radio call coming to save them, just their word and their composure, and their right to be believed the first time they said it. Thank you so much for watching this one through to the end. It means a lot that you stuck with Marcus's story all the way to King Street and back. If it moved you even a little, drop a like and hit subscribe, because I've got 2 more stories picked out that I think you're going to love just as much as this one, maybe more. I'll see you in the next one.